Hi, I'm Donna.
I'm Abby.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Will, and this is our presentation on why employers often do not hire and retain workers with disabilities. So there actually has been a lot of previous research on this topic, and a lot of it has painted a generally rosy picture of the workplace environment for persons with disability. One study specifically looked at Fortune 500 companies and found that there was just, in general, favorable attitudes towards persons with disability. And oftentimes employers cite that when they do provide accommodations, that those accommodations are quote-unquote worth the investment. And so this is actually pretty encouraging. It suggests that persons with disabilities can achieve at a high level in the workplace when there's accommodations. However, the reason we're doing this research and examining this study is because there's a very high level of unemployment for persons with disability relative to like the general population, and persons with disability are also not retained at as high of a level. So before we get into the details, why does this even matter? There's 57 million people with like an overt disability, like something that you can plainly see, and then there's like countless more with like under the surface disabilities, like harder to tell and detect. And what this says is we're missing out on basically the productivity of 57 million people and possibly more. And when we do provide accommodations, these people do succeed at a high level. So why aren't we including them? We could get so much more done as a society just by including everyone. And just from like a moral standpoint, we shouldn't be excluding someone just because they were born with something that they couldn't control. Like, these people are capable of success, so we can't be depriving them of successful opportunities. It's not something we do with able-bodied people, so we shouldn't do it with disabled people. Thanks.
So the main limitation of previous research that has been looked at is the social desirability bias, which essentially means that when participants are taking the survey, they tend to answer the questions based on what they think the researcher wants them to answer to in order to avoid any negative stigma toward people with disability or any bad reflection on their own businesses. And the selection bias also goes along with this, meaning that those who took the survey tend to have more passion for disability, which excludes people who may be against the idea of hiring people with disabilities.
So for the current research, they worked with 88 reluctant employers. So these are employers who were resistant to hire or to accommodate individuals who have disabilities. So rather than being straightforward and asking why they did not hire or retain people with disabilities, they used an indirect questioning method where they used questions such as why don't employers hire people with disabilities? And so it was an open-ended question where these employers could speak about their opinions and not specifically about their companies. And so these employers didn't feel like they were being personally attacked, and they could just give their opinions about companies in general. So they also asked agree and disagree statements that these employers could answer questions with. And some of the two questionnaires that they had were the barriers to hiring and retaining workers, and practical and policy strategies to hiring and retaining. So with these open-ended questions, the employers felt like they could answer honestly.
So the top reasons for not hiring workers with disabilities tended to revolve around cost accommodations, lack of accommodations, and awareness of the needs of workers with disabilities, as well as the fear of just being unable to fire the worker due to lawsuit. The top reasons for not retaining workers with disabilities revolved around also the lack of awareness as to how to handle the workers' needs. Concern that the workers will eventually become either legal or financial liabilities, and costly accommodations as well. And the top practical strategies to improve hiring and retention of workers with disabilities included better training of the current employees in order to, so they know how to handle any issues they may occur, hiring an expertise in the field of knowing how to accommodate workers with disabilities, and just writing up guidelines so that current workers know what to do if accommodation or accommodation issues occur in the business. And lastly, the top policy strategies of improving and hiring retention of workers with disabilities include just any accommodations to a cost that may occur or any incentives that can be given, such as tax breaks, new programs that are added, or subsidies for new workers.
Okay, so I will be discussing the discussion. And human resources professionals were asked to explain their experiences and to reasons why they didn't think employers would hire workers with disabilities. And they used an approach that aimed at reducing two biases that Donna explained earlier, the social desirability bias and the selection and non-selection bias. And there were 468 questionnaires that were filled out. And there were similarities within those questionnaires. And people primarily agreed on 3 barriers, which were ignorance, cost, and legal liability. The first one is ignorance. Employers lacked an awareness of how to deal with and accommodate workers with disabilities. There was an added burden to the staff because they didn't know that their responsibilities under their law, and they didn't know how to research appropriate accommodations, how to deal with the costs and benefits and other issues that would arise. There was also a lack of familiarity as to how to deal with them around the workplace, and beliefs and stereotypes of disabled people, such as being absent from work and just a general social discomfort around them. The second barrier is cost. They were concerned about the potential expense of hiring people with disabilities. The typical individual pays for itself in increased productivity and the ability to retain an experienced worker. So they are worried that they would have to change the entire workplace to be accessible for those people with disabilities, which would entail a higher cost. The last barrier is legal liability. Employers often worry that employing a worker with disability puts them at a risk of a lawsuit or formal distribution complaint. They fear that just making a mistake would get them in trouble, as well as they would threaten legal action if the employer were to fire them or their employment would be terminated. Other concerns for the employers would be job performance. Employers were concerned about those with disabilities not being able to live up to the expectations of just normal workers, and that they might also present problems with illness. As far as the findings go, the findings from this experiment differ substantially because the previous studies paint a more realistic picture of the general attitudes of employers, and ours was skewed because of sample size.
So Abby talked a lot about how a lot of these employers have concerns about hiring and retaining employers with disabilities, and a lot of these concerns stem from a lack of awareness about individuals who have disabilities. And so this lack of awareness allows stereotypes to continue. So stereotypes about people with disabilities in the workplace include that people with disabilities are absent from work, they're not able to be as productive, and just in terms of social climate, it's a little more difficult. There's a stereotype that it's a little more difficult to interact with these individuals. And so by continuing to not hire these employers, this misinformation can continue. So it's really important to get people with disabilities involved in the workplace. And one way we can do that is by creating more training programs for employers in general. So just educating them about ways to incorporate people with disabilities into the workplace. And this can dismantle some of the stereotypes, dispel some of the misinformation, and create a more diverse workplace. And so it's not only the job of the employers to get involved in this situation. They can hire outside experts to kind of get involved, educate not only the employers but the employees as well, so they feel comfortable interacting with people who have different identities, and this can create just a more diverse, welcoming atmosphere for people of very many abilities there's not just one type of body that's able to perform different tasks, and so it's really important that we educate people on different identities, different abilities, and we find ways to include everyone, make everyone feel comfortable, even if it does require a little extra work. It's really important to do that in the workplace so everyone is able to feel productive and to be welcomed in society. So thank you.